Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Maggie Glennon, and I'm the Director of State Government Affairs for Khoe.org. And I'm so excited to kick off this final round of sessions at ExcelinEd this year. And I can't wait to get to this panel on why computer science is more important than ever. But before I do, I just want to give a brief introduction and set the stage for all of us. So Khoe.org is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the idea that all students should have the opportunity to learn computer science. It's a goal, so we tackle it on a variety of fronts, from free curriculum and tools to teacher professional development, national and state advocacy, which is something that myself and Alexis work on, and events like the annual Hour of Code. So at Khoe.org, we think that learning computer science is always important, but in the midst of a global pandemic, it's become clear that computer science is more important than ever. Everything we do has changed, including the way we work, learn, and communicate, and computer science is foundational to everything that we do. Yet across the United States, only 47% of high schools actually even offer a single computer science course. States are working to broaden participation in computer science by passing policies to make computer science a fundamental part of the K-12 education system. And over the past year, 28 states passed 42 new laws and regulations promoting computer science. In addition to adopting more policies, state education leaders extend and innovate on previously adopted policies, like continuing to fund computer science education, supporting teachers and students, and providing leadership and guidance. But despite the tremendous gains in access, data shows that in the nation as a whole, schools in rural communities and schools with higher percentages of economically disadvantaged students are far less likely to teach computer science. Students from historically marginalized racial and ethnic groups are underrepresented in taking AP computer science exams, even when they attend a school that teaches it. And female students still only make up 27% of AP computer science exam takers. We can see how low participation in high school computer science courses by women and diverse student groups becomes further exacerbated in college and careers. We clearly have a lot we can and should cover, so we're thrilled to be joined by a panel of women in tech who understand the significance of K-12 computer science access and participation. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our incredible panel today. Joining us are Courtney Jensen, Executive Director for California and the Southwest at TechNet, Siu-Li, Khoe, Vice President of Business Development at the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, and Allyson, Knox, Director of Education Policy at Microsoft. And we are moderated by Khoe.org's own Alexis Harrigan. And I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Maggie. I am honored to be on this extraordinary panel discussion with some amazing women in tech who I've had the opportunity to work with. I'll just kick us right off. I would love to have each of you, I know Maggie introduced you, but each of you talk a little bit more about your roles in tech, how you ended up in your position. I know you are inspiring to so many different women who aspire to be in the technology field, but would love to hear about your career trajectory and then how you have been able to interact with computer science advocacy using your influence and role. So I'll start with Courtney.
Thanks, Alexis. And first, just want to say thank you to Khoe.org for including me and TechNet on this amazing panel. It's always great to be on a panel full of women, especially talking about computer science and tech. So my background is actually in policy and politics, and I actually started my career in the California State Capitol working for assembly members on a range of issues, but including tech and education. And after working in the Capitol, I moved to a different association working for credit unions and actually worked on financial literacy education while at that association. And then 2 years ago, joined TechNet. TechNet, for those who aren't familiar, is a trade association that represents about 80 member companies, including dynamic American businesses ranging from startups to the most iconic companies on the planet in the fields of information technology, e-commerce, the sharing and gig economies, advanced energy, cybersecurity, venture capital, and finance. Although the companies TechNet represents are very diverse, and we cover a huge range of issues, what they all have in common is the need for an educated, diverse workforce. And two of the top policy areas we cover at TechNet are education and workforce development and diversity and inclusion. And within those, we support policies that help prepare our students to be successful parts of the global, interconnected, and technology-driven economy. And supporting policy efforts that have the goal of increasing women in tech is such a fun part of my job. I love it. You know, we deal with a lot of different issues, but this one is a really fun one to fight for every day. And working with partners like Microsoft and code.org, we really have the opportunity to diversify not only the tech workforce, but the future of work in many, many different industries with computer science. So that's just a little bit about me and my role, and something I hope people know about TechNet moving forward.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Siu-Li, I'd love to turn it over to you now.
Sure. Thank you, Alexis. And thank you, code.org, for this opportunity. Super winding personal story from my part. I came to computer science and actually have a degree in computer science, but not because I was some sort of a gaming geek or wanted to do software development. I was really inspired by how I could draw using code, and I loved spirographs. And so I'm dating myself in the early 1980s. You know, drawing with a turtle was pretty cool. As a career, I was really interested in health and how systems and connections come together. And I was fortunate enough to be at MIT, where bioelectrical engineering really continues to invent models for how our body works for the sake of better diagnostics, robotics, and therapies. But really, that computer science there was both the software and the hardware side. I had the good fortune of applying all of that knowledge in scaling startups as well as digital transformation on the private side, and really have just recently come to the public side to try and do the scaling that I did at large companies and small companies for an ecosystem. And we can't really talk about commerce without talking about skilling, reskilling, and continuous keeping up with technology nowadays. So I personally feel, especially as a woman, that computer science can be a means to an end, and that end doesn't necessarily have to be computer science. It can be biology or better education or whatever it is, and art. And so I try to serve where I can, speaking and mentoring and on boards. But I think we'll have a chance through your questions to also address what we're doing at a state level between public and private organizations to help computer science, but also women in tech. So just a little bit about me, and I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about women in tech and public-private cooperation.
Thank you, Siu-Li. We're so excited to have you here. Turn it over for final introductions to Allyson Knox for Microsoft.
Sure, and thanks. Thanks code.org and Excellence in Education for putting on this great annual conference, which we've loved being engaged with for many years. I think the broader question is, how do women end up being attracted to and feeling invited to being in a huge tech company like a Google or a Microsoft or an Amazon? And it's really interesting because unlike others, I certainly did not study it in college. I studied literature. And I wanted to be, when I grew up, sort of a community organizer. So I had 8 different jobs out of college, and they were always in this intersection between business and education. But I ended up leading a tech association when tech associations weren't very, in fact, nobody even really knew what the internet was when I was like younger. And so then, I guess I always wondered, like, why did I think that I could lead a tech association and ultimately be at a company like Microsoft? And truthfully, I think it has to do with my family. So my brother was 13 and got a TRS 80, and we thought it was funny to sit there and in DOS play around and make funny faces. I love the story about the turtle design. We thought it was funny. Halloween came along. We thought it was funny to put our TRS 80 up in the house and the door when the trick-or-treaters came to scare them, and so I never thought, and then I ended up taking computer science in high school, but throughout, I never thought of technology as a big deal. I thought it was just something fun that people did. It was sort of like a hobby. And then things started to explode and take off in the internet. And so I think what I'm trying to say is I feel super privileged to have my job between philanthropies and government affairs at Microsoft, like incredibly privileged. But my broader theme is, and I think what we're going to get to probably next is like, why do women end up counting themselves in this field? And I think part of it is demystifying that it's impossible to get into, or that people can't do it, or if you study something else, you can't come to it, because I'm a firm believer you can. Back over to you, Alexis. Oh, you might be on mute.
That's the line of 2020. Might be on mute. Well, thank you all three of you for sharing your journeys and your roles in the space of computer science education. I'd love to start with hearing about sort of some of the work you have done in the computer science education space in your respective roles. We have some of you representing work nationally, some of you very state specific, others regionally. So I'll start with Siu-Li. We'll just love to hear, what are some of the biggest wins you've seen in computer science education in Rhode Island? And what were some of the challenges that were presented when you were trying to move some of these policies?
Sure. So I think I'd love to start with our current governor, Gina Raimondo, when she came on in 2016 and started Computer Science for RI. I'm sure Allyson will be able to comment on this as well, as Microsoft was a major partner with TEALS K-12 in particular high schools as well as teacher training. But CS4RI is a computer science for Rhode Island partnership between Rhode Island state government, the Department of Education and K through 12 schools, higher education and private industry, as well as nonprofits in Rhode Island. And what we saw just between 2016 and 2018 is an 8% increase in AP computer science enrollment. I think, Maggie, you mentioned that as one of the indicators. And we see that, we know that there may be even more of an increase, but we just don't have those 2020 numbers right now. So I think that's a major win to see those increases in AP numbers. The other thing I would say is a win is we've had increasing participation in a kind of top of funnel, I would say, event that we do every year called the CS4RI Summit, which has all of the high school students, no matter whether they're in computer science or not, come to a kind of an expo where we have private industry come and do all kinds of fun things. I was an executive director, Moonlight, for Rhode Island VR. So we had a set of locker rooms full of fun VR things to try. And we have had, north of 2,000 children all come for that event. So that's been great. And again, lots of participation from underserved districts, as well as from teachers and women. And then I would say, thirdly, that we've had some great wins with regards to getting both grants and applying those grants to teaching teachers to teach computer science. So besides computer science for Rhode Island, making sure that every student in Rhode Island gets computer science education, which is of course a huge win. We see the teaching the teachers as a really big part of increasing the quality of that education. And so just had a $2.5 million grant through Rhode that we received that will in addition to working with the districts that we have, kind of expanding the teacher education. So I think those are the 3 points I wanted to make. Thank you, Alexis. Back to you.
Thanks, Siu-Li. And in the spirit of grants and philanthropy, there's very few organizations that do as much as Microsoft has in this space for computer science education. So Allyson, would just love to hear from you. I know you work in so many states, based in DC, but would just love to hear your perspective here.
Sure. I mean, and Siu-Li, like, it's so great to be on the panel with you because we applaud Governor Raimondo so much. And I remember those early days where I came back to the company and I was so excited about a governor who had this huge vision. I mean, that's what it was. It was, we want to bring computer science education to every high school. And even though maybe some of us talk about that now, at that time, nobody really was. And
so much fun, right?
yeah, and it was like, and she was this amazing female governor, right? Yep. And there weren't that many high schools, let's be clear, right? So it was like, hey, this is doable. We have this great program. I would be remiss if I didn't actually say what it is. So TEALS is Technology, Education, and Literacy in Schools, TEALS. It's not the color. It started by a great individual named Kevin Wang who realized in Redmond, Washington, that computer science wasn't being taught in high schools. And so he walked across the street and started volunteering and co-teaching AP computer science. Today, we have 10,000 students, 455 high schools in the United States, 1,500 tech volunteers, 35% of the students are female, and 8% of the students now actually achieve at a higher level when they take the AP computer science exam through this program called TEALS. And so we said, how can we leverage the program and help Governor Raimondo get to where she wants to go? And so we have been partnering very closely throughout that entire process. I would say one of the biggest wins for Microsoft was in 2013, our president, Brad Smith, who really who spearheaded our company going all in on K-12 computer science. He went out and gave a speech. It was called the National Talent Strategy. And one big piece of it was, he said, there's only 9 states in the United States currently that award students high school graduation credit if they take an AP course, a rigorous high school course. And so if you really stop and think about it, kids across the country really had no reason to take AP computer science or a rigorous computer science course because they were getting like gym credit for taking the course, right? They were getting an elective. There was no math or science equivalency. There was no academic reward for them. We actually did some focus groups with students at the time, and they said, computer science is where the dumb kids go. And we couldn't really believe it. And it was just that perception that it wasn't rewarded. So he basically gave a speech and said, there's 9 states that give the credit, make it 50. And I'm so happy that in partnership with code.org, that in January of this year, we finally made it real, in partnership with a whole bunch of companies and a whole bunch of coalitions and state by state, it is now 50. And we believe that 19% there's an increase in that number of students taking computer science because they feel that they get that reward. So that's been a big one.
Thanks, Allyson. So shifting gears a little bit, I would love to turn it over to Courtney. Courtney, TechNet represents some of the biggest technology companies in the world. And you obviously are the center of the action in the California state capital, where many of those companies are in the Bay Area. So why have you seen so many, why do you think we've seen so many tech industries invest with philanthropy, with devices, with lobbying resources in this space? Is it just to get more computer programmers for their companies, do you think? I say that jokingly, but seriously, why do you think we see such a strong investment from industry?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Obviously, they need an educated workforce to fill the jobs that they have. But, I also think that it's just to, educate students to use the technology that's being developed. And that's a huge piece of this that we talk about often at TechNet. 91% of software jobs are outside of Silicon Valley, and 67% of computing jobs are outside the tech sector. So it's not just about, educating students to work at a tech company. It's educating students to work in every field of commerce, healthcare, space, in our homes, on our roads, infrastructure, in entertainment. Siu-Li mentioned art. I mean, you really can use computer science in every industry. It has such transferable skills. So I think for tech companies, it's really important for them to obviously fill the jobs that they have available, which are a lot, and they're high paying jobs. I mean, honestly, if I had known how high paying they were when I was in high school, maybe I've picked a different, major than political science when I went to college. But, so I think that's a huge piece of it. But we, as I mentioned, the responsible use of technology is a really important thing to our member companies. Students and teachers should have the opportunity to learn about the potential of careers, but also how to properly use the technology that they are using every day, whether it's their computer or their cell phone or their camera or their car. Those are all pieces of technology that people are using on a daily basis. I would also say privacy is a huge conversation in the public policy realm right now. And a lot of that is because, people, I think there's a responsibility that people have to understand how technology works, and we're not doing the job to educate our students of how it works. And so they can't protect themselves online. They can't protect themselves with their devices. And so if we're able to get early and often computer science education, I think that will be a huge help to people protecting themselves when they use technology, in their homes, in their cars, at school. And now in a COVID era, we have devices are a requirement often to do school. And so for teachers, and I know we're going to talk about this more, but for students and teachers, there's a huge need to understand how to even use the devices that they're being given to do school every day. And so, I think for tech companies, maybe started as a let's make sure we have an educated workforce, but it is progressed into making sure that students are really prepared to use the technology and now to use technology to do school.
That's great. I'm speaking now, taking off my Code.org hat for a second as a parent hat and doing remote learning. I have a first grade son. And the transition, like for many parents, for many students and teachers, it's been tough. We have a fantastic teacher, but she is struggling with the technology. Some of the parents are struggling with the technology. So we're seeing not only classrooms change, but frankly, the future of work change. We're having this conference remote. We're going to likely see a lot of these companies have more remote access for employees. Will we still be in person? We don't know yet. What's going to happen to the future of Silicon Valley with more companies being able to relocate to other locations? So really, I want to just hear from you. Why do you think in the face of the global pandemic, in the face of education and learning virtually changing, why do you think computer science is more important than ever? And I'll just open it up to anybody who wants to jump in.
I can try and take that next, Alexis. I think Courtney did an excellent job kind of starting us off. And I would add to her perspective and say, when I first came to Rhode Island, I was hired as somebody into a team called e-business. And it was a small kind of crack team. And we said, you know what? We know we're going to work ourselves out of a job because we know that e-business is going to be all business. Just as an underwriting to what Courtney said. And I can't say enough that, we've talked about both digital literacy as well as computer science to make that kind of definition difference. we talk a lot about digital literacy as the ability to use technology well, but I think it's just as important to get that basic computer science, which is that making idea. Talking to you, Alexis, as a parent, I know that I ran a small kind of prototype. I didn't call it computer science camp, right? But I got kind of a tech camp for girls, and kind of centered it all around self-expression. So this idea that you are using technology and computer science for self-expression kind of gets to Allyson's point of like, what is going to get this to feel accessible to anyone. And I think that creation and self-expression is definitely one of those ways. But then I'd go further and say, my gosh, if we look at not just the salaries of tech jobs, but what we're doing at a global scale, I think in order for us to be globally competitive, we have to think about the investment in computer science at all levels, because that is what is making us as a society and different ecosystems competitive, and we know this from multiple studies. So I would say that then that creation bug, I would hope would be in everything from data analytics and robotics to some of the more hardware focused and other computer science jobs that people don't always naturally think of when they think of computer science.
Thanks, Siu-Li. Courtney, Allyson, is there anything you would want to add to that?
I would just say, you often think of computer science as like sitting in front of a device. And these days, that's what we're all doing a lot. But often it's not. When you think of the younger kids who are learning computer science, they're learning like those soft skills of critical thinking that are so important for development. I think especially when they're often, at home and not getting a lot of exposure to the outside world. And so I think it gives an opportunity to learn some skills that they may be missing out on being in an in-person environment. And so I think it's even more important in a COVID era to have access to this type of education. I also think that, a lot of tech companies have really stepped up to donate a huge amount of devices and hotspots and different curriculum. I know Microsoft has done an incredible amount of work. So has Google and Apple and Amazon and others to provide, those devices, what is needed for states to allow their students and teachers to continue to teach. And those devices need to be utilized correctly. And a lot of that is just making sure that we're educating professional development, all of those kind of skills so that those devices can be used today, but also in the future. I think we really need to think about this as COVID's now, but we have other emergency, thing, you say this, Alexis, emergency preparedness. This is a huge piece of that. And whether it's an earthquake, being in California, wildfires, there's a huge amount of, things down the road that may not just be COVID, that we need to make sure that we're set up and ready to go so that students aren't losing out on those days of school. And so I think this is a really big opportunity for states to take to move, to really invest now to prepare for the future. It's not just about COVID, but it's now COVID and in the future. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think everybody covered it. I guess I don't. So the question is, is it more important than ever? So first off, I just want you to know it's more important, period. Computer science is the most important. So let's just agree. Say that. And I will probably never veer away from that stance. So that's I guess the one thing the pandemic has, I can't speak for everybody. There is that future of work conversation at least, especially in the Beltway, because I'm based in DC, where I felt like, it's sort of like different bagels, same conversation. I'm just kidding. You go from place to place and you talk about automation and globalization and AI and algorithms and how this is going to, displace the most, there's so many automated positions. And I think what a pandemic has done has reminded us that predictions that could disrupt society could actually be real. And so therefore, like, everything we're doing now to figure out remote work and hybrid work and all that is super important no matter what. But I do hope it reminds the country too that, like, when we say, when you look at where the work is going in the future, especially high paying jobs and mobile jobs and jobs that can be part-time but kind of pay a full-time wage, which I think a lot of women and men, but a lot of women would like access to right now. When we have all those predictions, and it seems maybe so unreal to so many people, that it's the same thing as the pandemic. It seemed like a global pandemic might have seemed unreal, but now it's really real. And so maybe it's going to light a fire. Maybe it's a greater political will, a greater calling that we can all sort of get more students engaged in this critical subject area. That's actually super fun. So I'll go on mute.
I think that's a great point. And thinking about women, especially to your point, we know that the research has shown that women are bearing the brunt of the current economic crisis, especially at home, in the healthcare field, as teachers. I mean, it's happening everywhere, and it's transcending, all fields. So with that in mind, women, knowing again, this isn't just about the tech workforce, but also recognizing that women and women of color especially are continue to be underrepresented in these high wage, high demand jobs and overrepresented in low wage service industry type jobs or healthcare or patient care type of jobs. So how do you think women can benefit from not only from, yes, computer science, we definitely want to speak about that, but then also the opportunities that computer science may be able to create in this potentially new economy that Allyson and Courtney and Siu-Li have all sort of referenced a little bit here?
So maybe I can start and say that, compared to some of my colleagues that are perhaps focusing in manufacturing or other jobs that require you to be in the office, I think tech jobs have, for the most part, been able to go remote. I think that's a good thing for women, one. Two, I think at least in Rhode Island, we have very much explicitly said we want these jobs to be available in an equitable, accessible way to both minorities as well as women. And so not only are we doing what we've talked about in K through 12 education, but in our workforce development programs, we're looking to target those communities as well. And not only with the skills development, but also the wraparound services. We know women, for example, may bear the brunt of figuring out how to take care of their child, while they go and get their education. So we've created programs where we take care of that. You need to find a babysitter and pay for it? Done, paid for. While you go and get your, your Microsoft certification, right? So I think that that's super important. So you have the jobs, you're able to skill, reskill, upskill people into it. And then I think the third thing is people need to think about, hey, I could be good at that job. And so we're actually using machine learning with some institutional and private partners to take all of this data that we're getting through unemployment that's happened in 2020 and offer non-traditional pathways to people that may have thought, because you only know what you know, right? So if everyone in your family has been in the restaurant industry, you may not think that you're great at coding. But if we have all of this data about you and we think that you might be good at coding, we're able to offer that. And I think that that's one way to make it more accessible. I hope that's helpful.
That's great. And I'm a terrible moderator because I always inevitably will jump in with my own ideas at some point. So I apologize. I should have briefed you on that ahead of time. I noticed in the participant chat, and I don't think folks can see this, but we have a few friends from College Board on. And I think what's really interesting talking about sort of this predictive technology, predictive opportunities. When we talk about women, I know the College Board is doing some really interesting and great work around PSAT, having younger students take the PSAT exam to actually help them realize you actually can be good at computer science. And, you know, it helps take away some of the bias of this is just for white male students who have interest or who have been studying this or who play video games. So I think that there are some really interesting ways that we can promote this early, promote it often, and I think especially remove some of the bias that's associated with it too. So I love the work that you're doing in Rhode Island, Siu-Li, and I noticed that Allyson jumped off mute there, so I'll turn it over to Allyson.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we really thank the College Board for the AP Principles course, in particular, Hattie's leadership, Cameron's, everybody's leadership in making sure that the course is ubiquitous. And I think Code.org has done an amazing job, TechNet as well. I mean, to remind us that if you want to have ed reform, you've got to go state by state and really talk to lawmakers. And if you want to make a case for especially those who are not represented to have greater access to this content, you have got to go and make that case over and over and over again to our lawmakers. Because I think the data is so clear, the trajectory of where the skills can take you, the high paying jobs, the mobility, the translation of skills, and portability among, you know, industries. Like, what is it? If 10 women take AP Computer Science, the principles course, or the intro course, or the more rigorous course, APA, 9 out of the 10 will say afterwards, if they, especially if they pass, that they express extremely high interest in pursuing it in post-secondary. You know, that's a great data point. You know, how many data points do we have like that in other subject areas? I don't think we do. So I just encourage people to not only, I mean, Microsoft, yes, we are taking TEALs and we are targeting Black and African-American high schools across the country. We are doubling down. We are making sure that we're addressing racial injustice. And I think so many tech companies are trying to do as much as they can, and especially in the K-12 space. But we also can't let go of the movement. And the movement is really a call to action. And we have to engage lawmakers in really understanding what this trajectory can do for our greater society. Wow, I get on my soapbox. Sorry.
I think you're preaching to the choir here on that. We've all worked with policymakers, with lawmakers. So actually, that's a great pivot point. So in your respective roles, either as lobbyists directly, as industry leaders, working in quasi-government, what do you think that there's misperceptions from elected officials, from policymakers? And what is our role? What are some of the challenges? I don't really have a great question here, but as somebody who talks to policymakers quite a bit, a lot of it for me, and I'm sure Maggie will agree here, is just educating. It's not keyboarding. It's not word processing. It's not how to turn on a computer, right? So can you speak a little bit about that work and how you advocate computer science directly to law and policymakers?
Maybe I'll start and kick it off. It's, as you said, Alexis, education. And it's year after year education because, you get one thing and you have steps, right? Where in a state, you want this, and then you want this, and then, there's a progress to making sure computer science is available in every school in that state. And I'll just use California, for example. Governor Newsom, has been a huge advocate of computer science education, even as lieutenant governor and before that. And he has, made investments to expand computer science education in California. But now in a COVID time with the budget issues that we're having, some of that's been rolled back. Last year, we got a computer science coordinator position, which is a huge thing in a state like California that's so needed to make sure that we are doing and rolling out computer science education throughout the state in a equitable way, in a way that makes use of the resources the best way they can be used. And we also got a $5 million EWIG grant that also got rolled back. Because of the budget issues that we now face because of COVID. And even in this year's budget, early when the governor introduced it, we had millions of dollars in potential computer science funding, and all of that was stripped away. And understanding the budget, issues that states are facing because of COVID, I think, as we've stated before, there's a strong network of organizations and leaders that are doing this work, like Microsoft, like Amazon, like Apple, who are private sector rolling out. But this can't be done, and it can't be done, throughout every school in every state without state government. And without our lawmakers really stepping up and partnering with us even more. And those investments still need to be made, even and especially in a COVID era, as we've said, to use those devices, use the opportunities that have been given by private companies in the most in the best way possible. And so I think, it's education, it's educating our lawmakers early, often, all the time, making sure that we're talking to them every day about computer science education, about what it is, about why it's important, and why, for women, why, as we've said, why it's important early, to get them engaged early. And for underrepresented students also. Without that early opportunity, we lose students. And that, is a lost opportunity for students to really engage and potentially have the opportunity for a high paying job, that's out there and available.
Yeah, I mean, Alexis, you said earlier that, there's a certain amount of preaching at the choir. And I do think there's a little bit of STEM computer science fatigue, right? Like, let's just be honest. Like, we all talk about this, go to conferences, go and talk to lawmakers. We've done the hour of code with our governors, and you walk into a room and immediately people think, I want people to learn how to use Microsoft Word, But even though it might be a little bit old to us, it in some ways for a lot of people, it's still brand new. So how do you make it new? And we do have a new president, and we do not have K-12 computer science education is not funded by a line in our federal budget. It is time for us to change that, right? And so I feel like we're at a new chapter. It's a different kind of chapter. We're all seasoned. We're more connected. We have our data. Let's make this, kids right now, they don't even nobody questions whether or not they take biology, physics. And I am nothing against those subject areas, right? But wouldn't it be great in 3 years? Let's have a vision like Gina Raimondo did. Let's have a vision that in 4 years from now, nobody bats an eye because everybody takes computer science. I mean, it's possible. Mm-hmm. But we got to do it.
Yep. Couldn't agree with you more. I took AP Physics in high school. I won't tell you the grade I got, but if I could go back, imagine if I had taken AP Computer Science instead, and if at the time it existed, AP Computer Science Principles. So, Siu-Li, was there anything you would like to add to that? I mean, I'm sure you work with the governor and law and policymakers, and we're so fortunate that the governor of Rhode Island gets it. But I'm sure that's not the case with all of the lawmakers you work with. Oh, you're still muted, Siu-Li.
I think all of us have to take a turn at being muted. I would echo what Courtney said about, some of this money has been rolled back, but I would also urge other states to look at creative ways of applying grants out there, federal and otherwise, to computer science and digital literacy. As a case in point, if you have a chance to look at Rhode Island's Back to Work program, it's $45 million to get Rhode Islanders back to work during this time of this crazy pandemic, and companies such as Microsoft and Salesforce have absolutely supported this, and it has very much to do with the ability to do remote work, and as Allyson said, to be more connected. So yes to goals, Allyson. Yes to putting the money behind it, Courtney. And we don't have all the answers either, Alexis. As you said, there are absolutely still lawmakers to be convinced, and I think the more that we across states can work together with companies such as Microsoft and Code.org, we'll just be able to amplify each other's message. So I really appreciate that opportunity as well.
Thank you so much. So we have 15 minutes left in our conversation. I'd love to encourage our participants in the audience to feel free to ask questions. We already have a really good one in the chat right now, so I'll just read it. And again, similar, we'll open it up to anybody who feels compelled to answer. So the question is, I think that COVID has highlighted the inequities impacting Black, Latinx, and Native American women. What role does tech have in creating a more supportive environment when we might feel overlooked or lacking in confidence to explore computer science careers? So to shorten it, how can we support women in tech, or women who may want to explore these types of fields?
Yeah, I guess I'll kick it out just because I guess I'm the tech, right? But I'm sure you guys have great ideas as well. This is an issue. This is an issue. I rattled off a little bit of, not rattled, described that, we're taking it really seriously. A lot of tech companies are taking it seriously right now, addressing racial injustice, new grant motions, millions of dollars, focusing on Black and African-American nonprofits that serve workforce needs, as well as Black and African-American focused high schools that are, we'd like to bring TEALs and computer science to those schools, new grant motions. There's a lot of activities. The question of, which I think you're getting at, which is how do we make people in our company who are already employed, who are Native American and representing a whole bunch of different backgrounds, as well as women, feel that they can progress up the ladder, bring more people into the tech industry, make people feel like they can be in tech and other industries, manufacturing, healthcare, etc. I think it's gonna take all companies to really commit and double down and to partner together. It goes beyond programmatic boutique programs. It goes to lawmaking. It goes to changing policy. And going back to where I started, which is I think we've got to make sure that everybody feels invited. So one of the things that we're doing right now, and I'll just end with this, is we do have a new offering where we've unlocked our LinkedIn courses. And there are different sets of courses. So some of them are, let's say, in something general like customer service oriented jobs. So it's like a whole pathway there, and you get a badge on your LinkedIn profile. But then there's tech oriented jobs, job pathways. So there's data science, and there's becoming a software engineer. And we have literally, these courses are solid, great, not Microsoft oriented always, not just our computer science languages, but like others. And we're making sure that all those courses are being promoted through our public workforce systems, to high schools, to community colleges. Everybody, it's ubiquitous, and it's from really foundational skills to the really high skills. So that is our way of saying, not only are you invited in, but we'll create pathways for you to come in, and then make sure that people feel that there's the wind at their back. But it's going to take all companies to get involved.
And I think Allyson said it, it's those pathways, creating those pathways. And Allyson, I love what you put together. I've been talking about, I know Andrea had forwarded it to me, and you can also take it on your own time, I think is another thing to say is, I know that question is coming from a group that is struggling and juggling a million things. And so that there's a great resource and you can take it on your own time. And then I would say the other thing that groups such as Microsoft and public grants have done is then to also provide you, and so please look for it if I am addressing you a particular person, to get the hardware and to get the broadband access. So because not everybody has that. And or they have devices and they're being used for their children's school because everyone's doing virtual learning. So we realize, from our listening that we not only have to provide those courses and access to those courses, but also the hardware and the broadband.
And just really quickly, I'll add, we at TechNet do represent, some of the biggest companies in tech. And this year we heard from our companies that one of the issues that they really wanted us to focus on was diversity and inclusion. And so every year we go through at TechNet, our policy principles is kind of our guiding document, and those are public on our website at TechNet. And we are, re-engaging with our diversity and inclusion policy principles, making sure that those accurately reflect how we can support our companies and support underrepresented communities getting access to tech careers. And Allyson mentioned it, working with lawmakers to make sure that we're supporting diversity in the tech workforce. And so that's something at TechNet we really have heard from our member companies and from the public also. And so we are working on that and we'll be engaging more moving forward.
That's so great to hear. When we are talking to law and policymakers, we do see in some states some really strong diversity, some fantastic women leaders being the chairs of education departments, appropriations committees. So this is top of mind for them. And I think it's a really strong accountability method as well to have law and policymakers when we go in and present to them, for them, to ask, well, what has industry done? We know industry has done a lot of work in the space of devices, broadband support, technology, curriculum, but to also be able to say even more than that, the focus on equity and diversity, I think is really impressive and shows that industry is doing a lot of really strong work, can obviously be doing better, we all can, but then also using that as another method to really show the significance of having state investments in this space too. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat at the moment, but just out of my own curiosity, given that you all do work or interact in the tech sector, and maybe this is a little bit more for Allyson and Courtney, we see this remote space now, and this isn't necessarily a computer science question, but folks working remotely, we're all working remotely now. What do you think is going to happen to kind of those Silicon Valley type jobs, companies? I remember reading about the REI Seattle switch up there with Facebook buying the REI corporate headquarters because they're like, we're just going to go remote and work regionally. So would love to hear just your perspective. And again, it's not computer science related, just my own curiosity.
I'll start, and if Allyson can add. I think there's two reasons why Silicon Valley is changing. I think one is because of remote learning or remote working and the ability that has now. I think the other thing is it's really expensive to live and work in Silicon Valley and very expensive to run a business in California. So we just saw, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HPE, announce that they're moving their headquarters out of California. And I think that is probably a mix of all of this, a mix of more remote working, a mix of it's too expensive to have to live in Silicon Valley and the issues that California has with housing. And that is a whole nother topic.
Yep.
But, so I think it's a mix of all of that. But I definitely think, just having friends in the tech industry. I live in Sacramento. It's about, an hour and a half, 2 hours. 3 hours in normal time with traffic from Silicon Valley. And I have a ton of friends who used to live in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco that have moved up to Sacramento or moved to LA or moved to San Diego or moved out of state because they can do that. They can work from wherever now. And I think that the companies and a lot of companies have announced that they're not going back, to in-person working for the foreseeable future, at least, halfway through next year, maybe all of next year. I think when we have a vaccine, we'll see if that changes. But I think it actually, frees up employees, but it frees up the employer also to hire, other people, right? They now have the entire universe to pick from when they are hiring somebody. And I think for women in tech, that is a huge opportunity, as Siu-Li mentioned earlier. And so I think Silicon Valley is going to change a lot. I don't know what it's going to end up looking like after we have a vaccine and things maybe go sort of back to normal. But I think there's a mix of things that are impacting the future of Silicon Valley.
It's a great perspective, Courtney.
Yeah, so Microsoft really hasn't some tech companies I think have already definitively said we're never going to be fully coming back in person. We have various sort of options, but here, this is what I think is interesting. I think that this is a real time, everyone's learning, right? And the one thing that the good results out of everyone sort of going through this collectively is it's asking you questions like, well, how do I generate value? Is it about me being in an office, or is it about the way I write, or is it? So it's asking new questions. I think that that's kind of a great thing in general. I've been at the company 16 years, and my office has always been my laptop, right? I never really thought of it as a physical place. Now I'm very fortunate to have a spot in DC, but I think what I'm the most concerned about is that I don't want to get to a point where I do feel like there's a bit of a, tech can be sort of in its own bubble and universe. And sometimes can we still relate to the person who does need to be building something with their hands, make sure that we're empathetic, we're understanding that not everyone is going to be afforded the luxury of not going back. I do see it as a privilege. I really do. And other people would say, oh, it's a curse, right? I hate being home all the time. But the mobility involved is, and the flexibility potentially in your time. I just would love for all people to recognize the value of work is sort of equitably. And I think this is an element of it, but that's just a personal thing.
Perhaps I could put a point on what Allyson said, and then my hope for society and humans in general is for us to be able to tap into our unique strengths, and for the workforce to recognize us for how we work best, and to be able to tap into that. Whether you are a tech worker that needs to be around people, or you're a tech worker that wants to hole up, that style and your wonderful output that you have to give the world, you should be able to find a match for how you work. That last sentence didn't make any sense, but
we got you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Siu-Li. And that I think is actually a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation. I'll turn it over to Maggie. But before I do, just wanted to say thank you so much, Courtney, Siu-Li, and Allyson. You all are doing incredible work to advance computer science education for women, girls, and students overall. So just thank you for being here, and I'll turn it back over to Maggie to close this out.
Thank you, Alexis. I actually don't know what to say after all of that. I think everything has been covered, but in case anyone needs any more convincing, studies show that students learning computer science in primary school perform better in reading, math, and science. In secondary school, have better scores on standardized AP exams, and are 17% more likely to attend college. And so it's really clear that this is an issue that we should be working on, and we have really good people working on at every single part of the spectrum, from government to tech to nonprofit. And so I'm really thankful for all of you joining us today and talking about your experiences and what we can do to make sure our students have the opportunities to succeed today and beyond. So thank you so much, and thank you to all our participants for sticking with us at 5 o'clock. So thank you, East Coasters especially. And
Thanks, Equitable.org. Thanks, Excellence. Bye, everyone.